Good morning. Thank you, Ron. I figure we might have a fewer number this morning than we do. A lot of people have gone across the street for the Vacation Bible School kickoff, and that's good. That's what they need to be if they have kids. So I'm happy to be back. I want to thank John. I know how well John prepares for his classes. So thank you, John Fowles. Appreciate you filling in last week. Very much so. Before we get started, I've asked Brother Philip Shivel if he would to lead us in a prayer.
Shall we pray? God and Father in heaven, we thank you for the day, the beautiful Lord's Day that you bless us with. And be with each of us today, Father, as we enter into Bible study time and later into worship, Father. Help us to always acknowledge you as our creator and the author of everything that we know and love. And we thank you so much for the life that you allow us to live and for the opportunities that you give us each and every day to be lights in your kingdom. Be with us now as we go into study, Father, and help us to have an open heart and an open mind and take what is taught by Brother Brown and take it into our hearts, Father. Live a life according to your will. Thank you so much for your Son who died on the cross for our sins. In his name we pray. Amen.
We'll be starting with Exodus chapter 15 this morning. But just as a kind of a reminder, where are we right now in our study? Where did we leave off 2 weeks ago? Hopefully you guys remember, because it was definitely a breaking point in our study. And I told you this was the conclusion of this part of the book of Exodus. Anybody remember? That's it. From Abraham to the crossing of the Red Sea is we started our study talking about Abraham and him leaving Ur and how his family grew into the family that ended up going into Egypt, and et cetera, et cetera. So we concluded that part last week. Chapter 15, verse 21, we'll see another break here in just a few minutes as to what happened. Let's go ahead and tell you that chapter 15 probably is a chapter that's written to celebrate what had just happened. That God had delivered the people from captivity and also delivered them from the Red Sea. He poured the seas back over on the Egyptian soldiers. And let me add one note. We do know that Pharaoh was killed in that particular situation. And I'll reference that chapter and verse. I don't have it in front of me. But somebody came up to me last week and made that, or 2 weeks ago, and made that comment. It doesn't say in Exodus that that's the case, but we do find over in another text that Pharaoh was also killed trying to cross the Red Sea. I thought that was kind of an interesting note. This chapter deals with, again, celebration. A large portion of it is a song that's being sung by the people in praise of God. So we'll read that. Hopefully it will go where you'll understand it, and it'll go. We'll break it up a little bit. But I'm going to ask if you would, Brian, start chapter 15, and let's read verses 1 and 2, please.
Then Moses and the sons of Israel sang this song to the Lord and said, I will sing to the Lord, for the horse and its rider he has hurled into the sea. The Lord is my strength and song, and he has become my salvation. This is my God, and I will praise him, my father's God, and I will extol him.
You know, we're not told, but again, we have to believe this song probably occurred a brief time after the happening at the sea, because the things that are noted in this particular song would indicate that. Moses and all the Israelites did sing the song according to this text. Read verse 3, please.
The Lord is a warrior. The Lord.
I think your mic is breaking up just a little bit. Hold on just a second, Brian. Verse 3, the Lord is a man of war, the Lord is his name. We realize Jehovah is a man of war doesn't mean he's a war against people, he's a war against evil. And he certainly proved that. Verses 4 through 6, Brian.
All right. 4 through 6. Might still be breaking up. Am I on? I'll give it a shot. 4 through 6. Pharaoh's chariots and his army he has cast into the sea, and the choicest of his officers are drowned in the Red Sea. The deeps cover them. They went. Let me try that one.
While they're getting situated, let me read 4 through 6 real quick. Pharaoh's chariots and his host hath he cast into the sea. His chosen captains also are drowned in the Red Sea. The depths have covered them. They sank into the bottom as a stone. Thy right hand, O Lord, has become glorious in power. Thy right hand, O Lord, hath dashed in pieces the enemy. Verses 5 and 10 are similar. These passages translated into Hebrew literally mean they went gurgling down. Isn't that interesting? So verse 5, the depths have covered them, literally means they went gurgling down. Consider when it says that they sank, consider what they had on. It wasn't that like they were prepared for swimming at all. They would have had their armor on, so they would certainly have sank just like a rock would sink to the bottom of a body of water. So that weight obviously indicated that they certainly did sink, and probably very quickly. Brian, you got me?
All right.
I'm going to go ahead and read verses.
I've got you now.
Okay, hold on just a second. Okay.
Was that where you were talking about that Pharaoh died in the water? And verse 4 says that. Is that where you were thinking it
Now,
said
there's
that?
another reference that indicates that. I just don't remember what it is. I can
Did
give
you,
it to you next week.
did you notice that right there? Pharaoh's chariots and his hosts were cast into the sea. His chosen captains also are drowned in the Red Sea.
Right.
Also means that he was right there in that
Well, we know
verse.
for sure that he was. We can use that reference. There's another
Yeah.
one as well. Yes,
Yeah.
ma'am.
If you go back to Exodus 14, verse 5, it mentions Pharaoh went and through the 10, it mentions about Pharaoh being with the host that went after Moses.
Yeah. What I'm speaking of, it literally does say that he was one that went down. Instead of us holding up the class, I'll get that reference. I'll have it for you next week. All right, let's see, Brian, are you ready, think?
Ready.
All right, let's go with 7 through 10, please.
And in the greatness of thine excellence, thou dost overthrow those who rise up against thee. Thou dost send forth thy burning anger, and it consumes them as chaff. And at the blast of thy nostrils, the waters were piled up. The flowing waters stood up like a heap. The deeps were congealed in the heart of the sea. The enemy said, I will pursue, I will overtake, I will divide the spoil. My desire shall be gratified against them. I will draw out my sword, my hand shall destroy them. Thou didst blow with thy wind, the sea covered them. They sank like lead in the mighty waters.
Now, let's get the picture here. I don't want us just to read a lot of words, and I'm guilty of doing that too when I do my studies sometimes. I want you to visualize what we have here. We have 600,000 men and their wives and children doing what? What are they doing? They're singing. They're singing. That's what it says in verse 2, right? Can you imagine the passion and the appreciation that these people must have had while they were singing this song? I find it really interesting, too, that in verse 8, what's the description that's given about the wind that God sent to open up, to dry the land? What does he call it? Everybody, somebody look at, read verse 8 again, Brian.
And at the blast of thy nostrils,
Okay, right there. At the blast of your nostrils, the wind that you created, you opened up the sea and you dried it. I just think that's really interesting the way that's expressed. Yes, Jim?
You've brought out many times in this study that we're a lot like the Israelites. And notice how they're praising him and giving him the credit for doing all this for them. But it's not going to be long till they turn their back on him and complain and carry on and murmur. And that's the reason they wind up wandering in the wilderness. And that's exactly the way we are. One day we're all for God, and the next day we're trying to do it on our own.
Yeah, that's a good point. Last week we studied a little bit about, we had a lesson called the cost of freedom. And we as a country do the same thing. When 9/11 took place, how long was it before people hit their knees? And at least they seemed to want God to take care of us. And it just didn't take very long for that to change again. And unfortunately, we forget too quick. Anything else through verse 10? I do appreciate your comments. Let's go 11 through 15, please.
Who is like thee among the gods, O Lord? Who is like thee, majestic in holiness, awesome in praises, working wonders? Thou didst stretch out thy right hand, the earth swallowed them. In thy loving kindness thou hast led the people whom thou hast redeemed. In thy strength thou hast guided them to thy holy habitation. The peoples have heard, they tremble. Anguish has gripped the inhabitants of Philistia. Then the chiefs of Edom were dismayed. The leaders of Moab, trembling, grips them. All the inhabitants of Canaan have melted away.
So verse 11, I think, points out something if we really look at it close enough. We know that God, through his plagues and other things, proved that their gods were non-existent. They were nothing but clay and wood. So he asked a rhetorical question. They sing a rhetorical question or rhetorical comment here. And he says, who is like unto thee, O Lord, among the gods? And the answer obviously would be obvious, right? There is none other. So I find that also to be kind of interesting. In verse 12, it says the earth swallowed them. We find a similar description found in Jonah 2:5. The earth with its bars closed upon me forever. Kind of a similar type expression. And then in verse 13, what's the holy habitation he's speaking of? Read 13 again, Brian, please.
In thy loving kindness thou hast led the people whom thou hast redeemed. In thy strength thou hast guided them to thy holy habitation.
What's it referring to here, the holy habitation? Promised land, land of Canaan. Yes, ma'am. Verses 16 through 18, I don't really have any comments on that. Read that if you would, kind of quickly, Brian.
Terror and dread fall upon them. By thy greatness of thine arm they are motionless as stone. Until thy people pass over, O Lord, until the people pass over whom thou hast purchased. Thou wilt bring them and plant them in the mountain of thine inheritance, the place, O Lord, which thou hast made for thy dwelling, the sanctuary, O Lord, which thy hands have established. The Lord shall reign forever and ever.
Okay, and then verse 19 we're getting ready to read. It really sums up the ending of the song, and then we'll change the directions a little bit. So when we read verse 19, just bear in mind this is the last, very end of the song. Read verse 19, Brian.
For the horses of Pharaoh with his chariots and his horsemen went into the sea, and the Lord brought back the waters of the sea on them. But the sons of Israel walked on dry land through the midst of the sea.
The victory, according to the summing up the song, always belongs to God. I know we went through that song pretty rapidly. I just don't want to get us bogged down, but I think you see the gist of it is just their thankfulness that they had made it thus far. Yes, ma'am.
I think it's interesting to note that the two tribes that were mentioned that were in Canaan was Moab and Edom. And Edom was the descendants of Esau, and Moab were descendants of one of Lot's sons. And there were a whole lot more other tribes, but these are the two that they mentioned.
Right. Yeah, we'll talk about the battles that they had with them in weeks to come, because they certainly battled with them. Okay, verse 20 by itself, please.
And Miriam the prophetess, Aaron's sister, took the timbrel in her hand, and the women went out after her with timbrels and with dancing.
I think we had a comment. Yes, Ms. Debbie.
They were talking last Sunday maybe, about how wide the Red Sea opened up for all that people to get through. And you're talking about 600,000 men alone, not counting their belongings and everything. And it's been figured that the Red Sea had to open 3 miles wide for them to get across in that length of time.
Interesting. I hadn't read that, but that makes sense.
And on a History Channel lately, they have found some things in the bottom of the Red Sea that could pertain to Pharaoh's chariots.
Yeah, I actually showed that. You may not have been here that week, Miss Debbie. I actually showed that. I had a slide that it depicted the wheels of the chariots and those kind of things. So, good, very good point. And I think one thing that does for us, and I always mention this, I think it's important. Once again, it validates our faith, and if we share that with people that are our kids or grandkids, it will help validate their faith as well. So, verse 20. Let's read that one more time, Brian. Verse 20.
And Miriam the prophetess, Aaron's sister, took the timbrel in her hand, and all the women went out after her with timbrels and with dancing.
Now, Miriam is the first woman mentioned in the Bible as a prophetess. Who was Miriam? Real loud. Moses and Aaron's sister. Correct. Okay. One thing I find interesting, and we won't read it, there's a little bit of lengthy reading, but we find in Numbers chapter 12, verses 6 through 8, there's a degree of inspiration that prophets had, and Moses had the full degree of inspiration. In verse 6 of that text, it says, God saying, he said, listen to my words. When there's a prophet among you, I, the Lord, reveal myself to them in visions. I speak to them in dreams. But this is not true of my servant Moses. He is faithful in all my house. With him I speak face to face, clearly and not in riddle. He sees the form of the Lord. So we see some degree of more importance or more ability to do things that God gave to Moses than he did through other prophets. Anything else through verse 20? Yes, ma'am, Miss Nancy.
I think it's kind of interesting. You know, when you're just studying and reading, things don't pop in your mind. But then when we come to class and we read it again, it takes more than one time to read something to figure it out. Mm-hmm. But don't you feel that, or if you even thought about it, how interesting this is that they speak. The writer speaks of Miriam, which was Aaron and Moses' sister, and did you ever think about the fact that she was in that water coming across that Red Sea with them? She was part of that group that was getting on the other side of that Red Sea. To me, it just hit me just then when we were reading that she was part of that crowd, but we don't really ever think of that when we're just studying and reading.
Right.
But and you know, there's probably other people that we might study about later, and I hadn't thought about it yet. But there's probably other people that was in that same situation that crossed that Red Sea. Right. And reckon why she picked up her timbrels and started singing and dancing. They were excited. They had gotten across that sea and they're away from Pharaoh. And they probably don't even know he died in the Red Sea.
Yeah, it's in keeping with the dances that were real prevalent during the times of David as well. And those dances were used to glorify God. Yeah. Exactly. Okay, good point. Verse 21, please.
And Miriam answered them, sing to the Lord, for he is highly exalted. The horse and his rider he has hurled into the sea.
Her mention indicates the importance that women were placed in the deliverance of the people. There was certainly a place for women, just like there were for men, and this is a typical example of that. Well, now we have another change of direction a little bit. Verse 21, at this verse comes a break. These verses actually conclude the event of the Red Sea passage and their celebration of that event. The rest of the book is the account of the journey onto Mount Sinai and their maneuvers in the wilderness. And that's what we will be having moving forward. Does somebody have a comment over here? Okay. Verses 22 through 26, please.
Then Moses led Israel from the Red Sea, and they went out into the wilderness of Shur. And they went 3 days in the wilderness and found no water. And when they came to Marah, They could not drink the waters of Marah, for they were bitter. Therefore it was named Marah. So the people grumbled at Moses, saying, "What shall we drink?" Then he cried out to the Lord, and the Lord showed him a tree, and he threw it into the waters, and the waters became sweet. There he made for them a statute and regulation, and there he tested them. And he said, "If you will give earnest heed to the voice of the Lord your God, and do what is right in his sight, and give ear to his commandments, and keep all his statutes, I will put none of the diseases on you which I have put on the Egyptians, for I, the Lord, am your healer."
So it's, like Jim just said, it's human nature. Just a few days ago, they were on top of the world. They were celebrating because their enemy, the Egyptians, had all been drowned in the sea. Look how quick after triumph their first obstacle comes. They ran out of water. What would you do if you were thirsty? Same thing they did, right? Pretty much. It's easy to sit back and look what they did. Why'd they do that? Because they're humans. They make mistakes just like we do. Now, in reality, what should they have done? They should have hit their knees, and they should have prayed to God. We need water. But they chose not to do that. They chose to complain. They could have appointed a committee to search for water, but they didn't do that. The murmuring is the main reason most of them did not enter Canaan, as you all probably very well know. In verse 25, don't be confused. They didn't literally pull the tree up from the roots and throw it in. Translated literally, that means a piece of wood. So there's a piece of wood that God used at that particular time as the token to make his will be done. It could have been anything, obviously. It was God's will, it was God, not just the plant. One more second, Ms. Phyllis. The question is, who is speaking here in verse 26? And the answer is God, and he makes a great promise to them. Yes, ma'am.
Going back to Miriam, I kind of wanted to check myself, and someone can correct me if I'm wrong, but Miriam was the one that was put Moses in the water when he was a child and was found by Pharaoh's daughter.
I think you're exactly right.
Yeah.
Good point. Yeah, so she's been there all along, exactly. And I'm trying to remember, help me out. Aaron was Moses' younger brother or older brother? Older? Okay, couldn't remember. Okay. Anything else through chapter 15? Chapter 16, let's read verses 1 through 3, please.
Then they set out from Elim, and all the congregation of the sons of Israel came to the wilderness of Sin, which is between Elim and Sinai, on the 15th day of the second month after their departure from the land of Egypt. And the whole congregation of the sons of Israel grumbled against Moses and Aaron in the wilderness. And the sons of Israel said to them, "Would that we had died by the Lord's hand in the land of Egypt, when we sat by the pots of meat, when we ate bread to the full. For you have brought us out into this wilderness to kill this whole assembly with hunger."
So now we have a timetable that's given to us by the writer, Moses. It's been about 6 weeks now from the time they've left Egypt to right now. So I think it's always interesting to know a time frame. We see in this text the third time that we see murmuring by the people, and it's pointed out that Moses and Aaron are the ones that are catching the brunt, aren't they? Here they've done all they can to release the people, and the people, it says in verse 3, the children of Israel said to them, talking about unto Moses and Aaron, "Would to God we had died by the hand of the Lord in the land of Egypt. We sat by flesh pots. We ate bread to the full. For you have brought us forth into this wilderness to kill this whole assembly with hunger." Well, what emotion would you have if you were Moses right now? Anger would be one. What's another one? What's harder to overcome than anger? Disappointment and hurt, right? Yeah, he'd be angry, but have you ever been angry? Of course you have. How long does it take you to get over anger? Normally not too long. But if somebody hurts you deeply and they say things that they shouldn't have said, how long does it take to get over that? It takes a longer time, in my opinion. So they were directing this toward him and toward Aaron, and it had to have hurt as much as they had done to try to help these people. We see a total lack of respect and faith toward God also at this time by them doing that. Because as I said, it's only been about 6 weeks since the sea had parted. Excuse me. Anybody ever been hungry here? I mean, really hungry? Probably not. Maybe. We may have that little gnawing in our stomach. I need something, I want something to eat. But these people, according to, they were hungry. So once again, they were behaving probably the same way that we may have behaved. When you're that hungry, your emotions probably get the best of you at times. So again, instead of lambasting them, let's understand the predicament that they were in. Yes, ma'am.
If we stop and think, God's leading them where he wants them to go. Moses doesn't know the way. And these people have never been in this country, so if we started out to go someplace and we don't know where it is or how to get there, we don't know what's along the way. But they've got the cloud and the fire. And there's just no trust in God. It's all on Moses. And Moses is responsible for doing this instead of looking to who was really leading them. And they never really did without.
Yeah. And I agree with everything you said. I still say human nature took over. Yes, sir.
Again, we compare this to ourselves. These Egyptians, they left Egypt under bondage, and they don't realize or remember that. They just remember things that they think they enjoyed. They didn't enjoy that bondage, but they didn't dwell on that as what they had been released from or relieved from. We're the same way. I look back in the 50s and 60s and think about how things were better back then, but I only remember the good things. We don't, like you said, Moses was disappointed because of the people's not being appreciative of what we've got. And I think we do that today too. We think that the things were better back such a time, but think about all the blessings that we have today that we didn't have back then.
Right. That's a very valid point. If you remember back the way those men, were treated with their loincloths and 110-degree temperature working, they probably forgot those things. They remembered the good things. Did somebody have a comment over here? Okay. In Egypt, they ate until we can say they could pop. They ate all they wanted. We also find in Numbers chapter 11, it says that they remembered the cucumbers, melons, leeks, onions, and garlic that they enjoyed as well. And I'm going to read because Jim just exactly had my note. Were they really being treated that great by Pharaoh, or were they just remembering the good old days like we do sometimes and only remember the great and not the bad? So just almost exactly what Jim said. Verses 4 through 8. Brian, please.
Then the Lord said to Moses, Behold, I will rain bread from heaven for you, and the people shall go out and gather a day's portion every day, that I may test them, whether or not they will walk in my instruction. And it will come about on the 6th day, when they prepare what they bring in, it will be twice as much as they gather daily. So Moses and Aaron said to all the sons of Israel, At evening you will know that the Lord has brought you out of the land of Egypt. And in the morning you will see the glory of the Lord, for he hears your grumblings against the Lord. And what are we that you grumble against us? And Moses said, This will happen when the Lord gives you meat to eat in the evening, and bread to the full in the morning. For the Lord hears your grumblings which you grumble against him. And what are we? Your grumblings are not against us, but against the Lord.
Jesus can be compared to the manna. I don't remember where I found this, but I thought it was kind of interesting. He came from heaven like manna. He brought spiritual life like manna brought physical life. And he is the only hope, as manna was the only hope to survive that the Israelites had. I think that's kind of interesting. So let's talk about what instructions regarding the manna. We find that in verse 4. Only one day's portion could be collected at a time. They were to be collected only in the morning and none to be collected on the seventh day. And the seventh day, of course, would be Saturday, Sabbath day. And none of it was to be left to the next day, so no hoarding was allowed. Again, human nature. It says get only enough for one day. Think we'd grab an extra cup or two just to be sure. And what happened to that if they did that? It spoiled. So God made it very clear. The food was there. Wouldn't be any problem in eating all they wanted. Pretty easy to understand. So what were they to do on, we'll cover this probably in a minute, but what were they to do on Friday? Get a double portion because Sabbath day, Saturday was a holy day and they did not do that kind of thing. So they gathered a double portion on Friday. Yes, Jim?
I think this is interesting. You think about some of the prayers that we read about later and what we pray for today. We actually use that statement in our prayer. Thank you for our daily bread. And I think that's teaching us a lesson to trust in God and not in ourselves. And, you know, we've got the rich man who hoarded up things for the future, and it was futile to him. And that was the wrong attitude to take. And we need to remember that God blesses us every day and not try to do things on our own.
That's another excellent point I hadn't thought about. Give us our daily bread. Obviously, you can refer back to that very easily. Good point, Jim. We'll see that they didn't adhere to these commandments from God the way it was instructed, and we've already talked about what the consequences were. Moses made it clear that Jehovah brought them out of the land and not he and Aaron, as they had suggested in verse 3. He's going to tell them how God is going to take care of them. But instead of blaming Moses and Aaron, it wasn't them that delivered them. Verses 9 through 12, Brian.
Then Moses said to Aaron, "Say to all the congregation of the sons of Israel, come near before the Lord, for he has heard your grumblings." And it came about as Aaron spoke to the whole congregation of the sons of Israel that they looked toward the wilderness, and behold, the glory of the Lord appeared in the cloud. And the Lord spoke to Moses, saying, I have heard the grumblings of the sons of Israel. Speak to them, saying, At twilight you shall eat meat, and in the morning you shall be filled with bread, and you shall know that I am the Lord your God.
So here again we see Aaron as the voice of Moses speaking for God. But in verse 12, Jehovah tells Moses to speak to the people, which I again think is interesting. I think we can see a little more about the love of God here too, the love that God has for us. He understands our weaknesses. Would he have preferred that they'd prayed? Obviously, he's their God. He would have. But even through murmurings, he took care of them. We have some type of sign from God for the people to encourage them. Just as Noah had a sign that's been mutilated and taken advantage of today when he got off the ark. And that's, of course, the rainbow, the promise that was made by God. But there was a sign here. I find it also interesting that meat is promised as well in verse 12. So not just manna, but meat is promised, and we see that comes to fruition as well. Anything else through verse 12? We're moving along pretty good here. 13 through 15, please.
So it came about at evening that the quails came up and covered the camp. And in the morning there was a layer of dew around the camp. When the layer of dew evaporated, behold, on the surface of the wilderness there was a fine, flake-like thing, fine as the frost on the ground. When the sons of Israel saw it, they said to one another, What is it? For they did not know what it was. And Moses said to them, It is the bread which the Lord has given you to eat.
So all this was on the ground. Who knows how thick it was, but the bottom line is they'd never seen it before. They even had to ask, what is this? And Moses' response is, that's food that God has provided for you to eat. Yes, ma'am.
I noticed in King James is what I read. It says
Speak up just a
children.
little bit, Miss Peggy.
Okay, it says children instead of sons. is that just a difference in the translation, or I'm sure the daughters?
What verse again is that? Read the verse. for
Well,
me.
it's several of these verses every time.
Verse 15
Every
probably.
time he read children, every time he read sons, it says children in the King James.
Mine, I've got the King James. What are you reading out, New King James or ESV?
I'm New American
New
Standard.
American Standard.
It's just a different
in
translation.
Yes,
It would
ma'am.
include the girls too, I guess.
I think the children probably would not be a better translation, but that's my opinion. Okay, verses 16 through 20, Brian, please.
This is what the Lord has commanded. Gather of it every man as much as he should eat. You shall take an omer apiece, according to the number of persons each of you has in his tent. And the sons of Israel did so, and some gathered much and some little. When they measured it with an omer, he who had gathered much had no excess, and he who had gathered little had no lack. Every man gathered as much as he should eat. And Moses said to them, let no man leave any of it until morning. But they did not listen to Moses, and some left part of it until morning, and it bred worms and became foul, and Moses was angry with them.
You know, God was concerned about greed at this time, and I guess gluttony or concern. Again, he wanted them to see the dependence on their daily need of him. He was freely giving them something, and he just didn't expect them to take advantage of it or hoard it, or didn't want them to. We don't know exactly how much an omer is. Some say it was 7 pints, some say it was 4 pints. It really doesn't matter. The key is that there was a specific amount that God allowed per family member in that household, so it wouldn't be a guess. That way, if there's supposed to have been 4 and they took 5, then that 5th one would have been spoiled and turned to worms. And what was the reaction of Moses? Oh, we haven't seen Moses get angry very many times. This is one of them. You know, he says, I told you what to do, told you what God said, and you chose to do it your way anyway. And it said in verse 20, and Moses was wroth with them, which is a very strong word. That's a word translated as stronger than anger. So he was not happy. Did I have a comment over here? Okay. Verses 21 through 30. It's a long reading, but let's go ahead and read the rest of the chapter. Read 21 through 30.
Through 30. And they gathered it morning by morning, every man as much as he should eat. But when the sun grew hot, it would melt. And it came about on the 6th day, they gathered twice as much bread, 2 omers for each one. When all the leaders of the congregation came and told Moses, then he said to them, this is what the Lord meant. Tomorrow is a Sabbath observance, a holy Sabbath to the Lord. Bake what you will bake and boil what you will boil, and all that is left over put aside to be kept until morning. So they put it aside until morning as Moses had ordered, and it did not become foul, nor was there any worm in it. And Moses said, eat it today, for today is a Sabbath to the Lord. Today you will not find it in the field. 6 days you shall gather it, but on the 7th day, the Sabbath, there will be none. And it came about on the 7th day that some of the people went out to gather, but they found none. Then the Lord said to Moses, how long do you refuse to keep my commandments and my instructions? See, the Lord has given you the Sabbath. Therefore he gives you bread for 2 days on the 6th day. Remain every man in his place. Let no man go out of his place on the 7th day. So the people rested on the 7th day.
Just 2 or 3 points real quick. Number one, we've already explained that they would get a double portion on Friday and none would be provided on the Sabbath day. This is the first mention of the word Sabbath, I believe, that we see in the Bible. And again, human nature, what did some of them do on the 7th day? They went out and looked for it. I just wondered, did they forget on Friday to get a double portion? They could have. Maybe they didn't get enough, so they went back out, but obviously there was none there. And 31 through 36, may I please just summarize it? A tub of manna was to be kept and was later placed where? The three things placed in the Ark of the Covenant, and one of those things would be a tub of that manna. We find here how long God provided this food also for his people, and it was how many years? How long did he provide manna for them? As long as they were wandering in the wilderness and they needed food, he provided for them. So for 40 years, he did this for them. You reckon you get tired of manna and quail? Sure we would. But it was food that was provided to them by God, and it sustained their life. Yes, Billy?
You know, this kind of reminds me, and most everybody here has got children, and if you don't, it'll happen one of these days. How many times have you told your children, how many times do I have to tell you this, folks? You know, that's what Moses had to be thinking. You know, God has sent this to you, and he's told you through me this and this and this, and you still don't remember what I told you yesterday?
Yeah.
It's human nature. You know why he got mad.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I think sometimes it doesn't have to be kids. It could be those of us that are older too that are guilty of that sometimes. Okay, anything through chapter 16? We're doing great. We've got 2 chapters done so far. We've got about 5 minutes. We'll go ahead and start into chapter 17. Read just verse 1, Brian, please.
Then all the congregation of the sons of Israel journeyed by stages from the wilderness of Sin, according to the command of the Lord, and camped at Rephidim, and there was no water for the people to drink.
The word Rephidim, which is where they camped, translated means resting place. Verses 2 and 3.
Therefore the people quarreled with Moses and said, "Give us water that we may drink." And Moses said to them, "Why do you quarrel with me? Why do you test the Lord?" But the people thirsted there for water, and they grumbled against Moses and said, "Why now have you brought us up from Egypt to kill us and our children and our livestock with thirst?"
Who's getting blamed? Moses. It says they strove with Moses, means they argued, they quarreled with him. It almost appears like a rebellious comment when they said, "Give us water." I'd love to know what their tone was. I'm sure it wasn't, "Moses, could you give us some water?" No, based on what we read here, it probably was pretty defiant the way they said that. "Give us water." It was almost like saying that or else. Let's evaluate God's people right now at this point. They were demanding a mortal man to give them something that he had no power to do so. They knew that Moses couldn't provide them water. Number 2, they weren't praying. They were complaining, but they weren't praying. They made a demand and not an humble petition to Moses to help them in this regard of their thirst. And their insinuation that Moses somehow planned their destruction probably would have been the thing that would have hurt Moses more than anything else. Let's read 4 through 6, please.
So Moses cried out to the Lord, saying, "What shall I do to this people? A little more, and they will stone me." Then the Lord said to Moses...
Read 4 again. Let's think about Moses, how concerned he is and what he says to God. Verse 4, Brian.
Yep. So Moses cried out to the Lord, saying, "What shall I do to this people? A little more, and they will stone me." Then the Lord said to Moses, "Pass before the people and take with you some of the elders of Israel, and take in your hand your staff with which you struck the Nile, and go. Behold, I will stand before you there on the rock at Horeb, and you shall strike the rock, and water will come out of it, that the people may drink." And Moses did so in the sight of the elders of Israel.
Moses went to the only person that we could go to for help. He went to God. That's the only person that we have in our lives many times is God to go to. And what better person to go to for us? It is not man's knowledge that answers major problems, but God does. And he knew at this point that he needed God's assistance. It's interesting to note at this time that only the elders were the witnesses to the act of striking the rock with the rod, and not all the nations. So it would have been their responsibility to go back to tell the people the power that God had. Anything through verse 6, because we are out of time. Any comments at all to conclude the class? They could see Moses, but they couldn't see God, exactly. Right. We'll pick up next week at verse 7, chapter 17. Thanks for your comments.